I think what Ahmed's doing at Northway and all of these projects is extremely good and useful. The main point is that when people get older and the kids flee the nest, and they do have a great sense of loneliness very often, people don't pay enough attention to old people, and they need, and they very much like, to be in touch with grandchildren and relatives, particularly in England when so many people go to live abroad or far away and they can't travel so easily. And I've seen this a great deal at Northway, and it means an awful lot to them if they can communicate by email with them, if they can know how to exchange photographs, if they can send Christmas cards. And the next stage, I think, would be to get them onto Skype. So with very limited incomes and the cost of telephones, BT, etc. being very high, they could communicate with family in Australia and other things on Skype, which is a remarkable invention. And another thing about these setups is that they get to meet other people. There's a social life. They can exchange ideas. They can help each other out. And of course, when you're younger, you simply don't realize what it's like to be older. And when you finally, as I do, pass your 65th, or get to your 65th in my case, you become far more conscious of the different social pressures. If, for example, we look at Facebook and the enormous amount it's done for children's social lives, and you suddenly realize the importance that the younger generation attached to making friends and sorting their way through different preferences. That is going to take a bit of time for elderly people to catch up on. I had a friend who signed up for one of these dating things, and he told me he was absolutely staggered at the amount of 60-plus ladies who, as a result of divorce or death of husband or whatever, were single and very much looking for companionship. And they had managed to get onto email or networks and all this. And the glue of society is very important at a time when people are becoming more and more detached, when it all seems a hostile world outside with cars and machines, and everybody seems in a hurry, and the old village watering hole or the fireplace doesn't have the importance or the regular use that it used to have. So this is one of those things where I think nothing but good can come of it. And there are side benefits, I think. Even if younger people get more attached to their elders and betters, or in some cases their elders and worse, it brings them into a fold where a sense of belonging to a community with spin-offs like social responsibility and so on do occur. And an interesting thing, I know people who visited prisons, and they say there's a lightning dash for computers among prisoners in education classes, because this is a wonderful new toy. Now, if you're growing up on a sink estate in northeastern England, the one thing you don't have is computers or a network or a family. Your social life, if you're young, is hanging out in streets, and you don't want to know about Grandad or whatever, because he's an old geezer, possibly down in the pub, drowning his sorrows. An incidental thing which is my personal belief is how very curious people can be. And something like Google is magnificent because you can actually find out all sorts of odd questions, and you can pursue your curiosity, which is very deeply inbuilt in humans since the first days of hammering a flint or finding out animals. And if there were greater possibilities for people realizing, particularly young kids and older people, that you can educate yourself at home, or you can find out things. It starts with bargains in the shops, it starts with very important things like being able to, if you're relatively immobile and it's a hell of a job to drag a shopping basket, you can actually go through to Tesco's and get a doorstep delivery because you can use the internet. Now, I think the saving in carer costs alone in terms of time and money should be factored in any assessment of the cost of keeping these social benefits alive and well. The spin-off, as we know, or possibly the greatest social cost we have, are alcohol and, with the kids, drugs, leading to crime and irresponsibility. Giving something that people can look at home is very good. They can pick up films without having to traipse out to the cinema. These things matter an awful lot to those with impaired mobility, and let's face it, all of us at some stage and towards the end of our lives are going to have impaired mobility. This is an astonishingly cheap solution to a great deal of expense and pain, in my opinion. Right, we'll stop there. One of the outstanding problems for elderly people is this business of buying train and bus tickets, which by booking in advance it means they often have to go down to the relevant train or bus office. They often have to stand in a queue for a long time, then they have to go all the way back home to get advantage of pre-booking ahead. Now, with the use of the internet, they can pre-order their tickets on the net, so they turn up on the day and they pick up the ticket. This is, as I understand it, because I haven't done that yet myself, but I can see that being of enormous help, particularly at the Christmas time when people try to meet their families and everything, and they make significant savings, which could mean the difference between sort of pleasant refreshment at Christmas and not being able to afford it if they can book ahead online. With the general picture in Oxford, as I've observed it, is that I've been very impressed by students at Brookes University, and a thing you sometimes forget is a large amount of altruism, goodwill and voluntary service in the bones and flesh of young students, particularly those educated and particularly those from middle class or relatively privileged families who feel they ought to give something back. Now, I've seen this very much in action, where young students who are by definition poor these days have actually come down and under Ahmed's supervision have given real help of their time absolutely for free. And this probably includes them paying for a bus ticket or two to help elderly people. Now, the feedback for that is very good, because then they can go back to their parents and say, look, I helped someone today. And of course it's the young who are leaders in that way. The elderly people are more concerned, I think, with looking after themselves, although these are, of course, generalizations. I've seen this at ground level. The only thing is that sometimes, of course, the elderly people have to explain to the young that they don't think quite as fast, and technical stuff the young take for granted have to be spelt out rather than teaching someone how to read and write. But that's a very good social service. Now, this actually spins out on a broader front, because there are many small businesses, local concerns and charities in which you make your mark and you establish your opinion or standing, as the French would say, among your business associates or community by what you can do. In this sense, I think some of the ideas behind David Cameron's society are pretty solid, and he's latched on to a very real vein of altruism and kindness, which is an essential part of British fair play. And these must be protected. And local organisations of all types very much like it, and particularly, Napoleon said, if I could give enough medals, I would conquer the world. If you award some form of small prizes or civic recognition for people who make outstanding contributions, that is a very real incentive, and the chap can show the certificate proudly to his family, and his standing, his esteem goes up within the family. And this is really the equivalent of giving medals to soldiers, a civilian equivalent. And I've seen that working with organisations like Oxford, the Housing Association here. I don't know much about Age Concern, which now has a new title, but I've been very impressed by the way they've gone to the trouble to have a car or a taxi picking up elderly people and taking them down to the Northway Centre. I'm still young enough and fit enough to make the relatively long walk, but for an elderly lady it makes a difference between being able to turn up and not being able to turn up. That is enormously valuable. Economics is, of course, an extremely difficult and speculative job. But it would be very interesting to have people who were qualified in economics and in social costs, I'm sure there are experts like this, just trying to work out what the benefit to the economy, either in terms of saving or in terms of increased good relations, actually come to. I suspect it's larger than many people estimate these days. And a classic warning against not taking this into consideration, of course, is in America, where they don't have the same central sense of social community, where the poverty beats poverty, anything like you've seen over here, where people are losing their houses, their jobs they've got nowhere to go to. And I'm afraid the me first frontier mentality, which has produced some of America's best shots, is now not working for vast sections of their population, and America is having a real crisis of confidence about this. I say this with some knowledge because I'm on the email the whole time to friends in America. Sorry, let's just think of what more we can say, or gaps or things that I haven't said. We have a very simple triangle here. It's Aid UK, Oxford Brookes, and the local community. And it has worked extremely well in the sense that people who would never otherwise benefit from each other's knowledge, Brookes, the young people learning an awful lot and gaining an awful lot, giving their best, and Aid UK, it's a very fine example of the social cooperation that, well, a few hundred years ago was, in much smaller communities, was taken for granted. In a rather large, mechanised and disassociated community, as with urban life in England today, these things very much need bolstering. Insofar as I can suggest, and I'm no sociologist, but this might be worth taking up as studying the model. Like all models, there are room for improvements at the edges and around there, but I think the basic principle is very sound. And all I know is from friends in the army and other things like that, that a unit of 4 is probably the optimum, whether it's 4 single men with the SAS or whether it's 4 small organisations working together. After that, communication becomes more scrambled with more people falling in holes, but that's just my personal view. I think this particular triangle is excellent. Okay.